Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of BIM Pure Live. I am your host, Nicolas Catelier. I am an architect, a BIM specialist, and the founder of BIM Pure. We've got a great guest and a great topic for you today about BIM, the age of AI. Before moving on, I like to have a look at the chat to see where people are watching from. We've got Lise from Denver, Dennis from Phoenix, Arizona. We've got Hugo from Ecuador, Mark from Alabama, Lolam from Berlin, Karsten from Copenhagen, Zhang from Istanbul, Walid from Belgium, we have Farhan from Deutschland, Anthony from Virginia, Marilu from Scotland. Thanks for watching live. Truly appreciate it. Always blown away to see where all people are watching from. A couple of things to announce and mention before we move on with the guest. First, thanks to Bird Tools for sponsoring this episode of BIM Pure Live. Bird Tools are creating a lot of amazing Revit plugins, some free, some paid, and the tool of the week that we'll be presenting, one of my personal favorite, the Dynamo Multiplayer. It is entirely free, and it lets you not only batch process Dynamo scripts, but do it on multiple Revit files at the same time, and even schedule it in the future, so you can run tasks at one moment during the week, for example. So you will open the menu, you select a Revit file, you can pick from ACC or BIM 360. In this case, we pick a local file. And then you can select one or multiple Dynamo scripts. You can also select multiple Revit models. You can change the option if you only want to synchronize, for example, and mine the central file if you want to brute force. So you can have a few tasks to make sure to pick the correct one. And when you're ready, check this out. You can click on proceed to do it immediately, or you can schedule the task. You click next to it on schedule, and then it creates a Windows task. You can give a name. You can select when the Dart starts and select a time. You can do it one time, or you can select, for example, a daily. You can run it multiple times a day. For example, you could say it recurs every 10 days or so, but my favorite way of working is say run it once a week. Typically, I like to pick Friday, right? Friday afternoon, where you run the entire task. It can be model health checks. It can be push Excel data from to Revit files once a week. I actually use this solution with a client. It is part of my 12 favorite Revit plugins, and there's a new tool where you can create a desktop shortcut to do it. So you just click on the shortcut and it runs all the demo scripts on the selected Revit models. It's entirely free. It's the Dynamo Multiplayer. Learn more by checking the link in the video description. I'm thrilled about this one because it's actually a tool that I've used with a couple of clients. It's extremely helpful. So extremely grateful for Bird Tools for creating the great Dynamo Multiplayer. All right, next one. The next episode of BIM Pure Live is going to be with Dan Warren, and it's going to be about ACC Build for architects. So ACC Build is mostly known for contractors to manage project in the field, but it can also be used for architects. And Dan is using it a lot, and he's got a presentation to show us which way exactly he's using it. So that's 2 weeks away from now, same time. So what date is that exactly? That is on February 19 at 3 p.m. Eastern with Dan Warren about ACC Build. He's an amazing expert with this tool. Looking forward to it. Okay, and what else do I have to mention? Let's see. Okay, final thing to announce, promise, then we can move on with the guests. I'm happy to announce a new mini course with Henrik Grant-Leron, which is also working at Reope, same as today's guest. And we've collaborated to create a mini course that lasts about 45 minutes, and it is called Practical OpenBIM. You know, last year, almost exactly 1 year ago, we've moved from Revit Pure to BIM Pure for many reasons, but one of them was to explore BIM beyond simply Autodesk's product. And I'm happy to have collaborated with Henrik to create this mini course, what is OpenBIM, but also practical, where Henrik will explain workflows he's actually using with clients to manage buildings and giving tips on specific workflows and tools to be using. So you can learn more at bimpure.com/practical-openbim. The link is also in the video description. It's not yet available. It's going to be released in March. The exact date is going to be announced soon. So I know some people watching live are in the BIM Pure membership, so it's of course, included at no extra cost for you. For the other, you can join the waitlist, and we'll let you know when the course is available. So that's Practical OpenBIM, a mini course to learn practical workflows. Okay, I think that's all I had to say. Okay, let's have one more look at the chat. We got Toby just from around here from Levy, Lonnie from Fort Worth, Texas, Pete from Toronto, Julio from Colombia, Magdalena from Oxford, Bryce from Washington State, Abdullah from Egypt, Crystal from Austin, Texas, Bird from Huntington Beach, California, Chase from Memphis, Tennessee, Ruben from Chile, and Ryan from Jacksonville, Florida. All right, so today's guest is Joachim Viktil. He's currently the CEO at Reope. He holds an MBA from INSEAD School and previously studied engineering. Before that, he worked at Ramball for more than 10 years. So I'm happy to bring you Joachim. How are you?
Hi, Nicholas. Thank you for bringing me on this live. It's really fun to be here. I enjoy your show, and I especially enjoyed last week with Alfonso, I have to say.
Yeah. Last week was fun. He also actually mentioned Reope a couple of times, so I thought it was good to have you just after, so we can cover some of the tools and workflows that he mentioned. So I'm curious, how did you end up the CEO at Reope? How did you get interested in BIM and AI in the first place?
BIM was something that, right out of my master's in engineering was something I was interested in. As a young engineer, is a way to get an edge. All the other engineers knows more than you, but at least you can figure out the tech stuff. You can do the BIM things. So it was kind of from the very first weeks and months I started working some 15 years ago. And then it kind of advanced from there. I started with some project management stuff in the beginning. And then over time, it was more data analytics, data science, and then gradually more and more into BIM. I did a small stint in an AI startup that was completely outside the field, but I just missed the built environment too much. So I jumped back.
Yeah, really. So you went to the dark side, the startup side, and you missed working with clients on day-to-day projects.
It is nice to see the impact you have and not to have to deal with lots of investors. That's definitely a plus.
And what were you doing? I saw that you worked at almost 11 years at another company. It's a big multidisciplinary consultancy firm. What were you mostly doing there?
First 5 years, I was working out of Oslo in Norway doing design management. We have like a specific project management role where you manage the engineering team, the different disciplines. So a typical thing would be, we would get some kind of brief from a customer. You make a design out of this text we have or this room program or something like that. And then we would collaborate with the architects and do the whole engineering of it. It was a lot of fun. You had to focus a lot on getting the right design decisions made and get different technical disciplines to discuss. And not all engineers are super happy to share their views in an open and fun, collaborative way. There's a lot of who's the smartest person in the room and why are you wrong and I'm right. So there's a little bit of people management, but you also need the technical understanding and knowledge to be able to do it. So it's perfect for me because I was never the hardcore structural engineer who loves to sit down and calculate all the stuff. I kind of got that part, but it wasn't my passion. So I got to mix it with the people part, which is a great combination for me.
Yeah, and so how long ago have you became the CEO at Reope? How did that happen? And could you say what Reope is, in fact, for people who might not know?
Yeah, it was just actually less than a year ago that I joined Reope, and it came out of a very turbulent and emotional time in my life where I joined this startup. I convinced my wife because we were living in Copenhagen, and she loved the city. I convinced her to move back to Oslo for this AI startup. And then the investors changed the CEO. I lost my job, and I just convinced the whole family to move to another country for my jobs.
Oh, sorry, we cannot hear you anymore. You seem to be muted. Let me see if I. Yeah, okay, that's good now. I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a hard position to be in when you have to pay the mortgage in 3 months and you look for a new job. And I was looking everywhere I could think and talking to everyone I knew. And I was looking for a job to pay the bills. But then I came across this one, and because I knew Håvard a little bit from before, and he mentioned they're looking for someone new. And then I was like, well, it's kind of too good to be true. It deals with the built environment, it's technology, it's architecture, engineering, and it pays the bills. So I was kind of skeptical in the beginning. It's like, this feels too good to be true. I was like a little bit nervous that it wasn't real. But then I ended up getting the job. Then a couple of tough months with some leadership challenges in the beginning, but then after summer last year, it's just been a blast.
Yeah, good. I think that it's your mic switched back to the all output, so maybe you have a loose connection somewhere. So you can check that out. So while you were plugging, switching back to your Yeti mic, yeah, can you explain what Reope is, so for people who might not know?
Yeah. How's this sound now, by the way?
Yeah, this sounds good now. Yeah, I think it's back to the good mic.
It looks like it lost the Yeti. Oh well. So Reope is a team of architects who codes. We have 4 people who's worked in architecture for a number of years. They've kind of felt the pain of converting ideas to design, going from using Rhino and Revit and then into visual programming with Dynamo and Grasshopper, then graduating into Python, and finally migrating to C#. So that's kind of the path that all 4 has been on. We're very lucky to have Dimitar, who's been with us from the beginning. He's the creator of Spring Nodes, one of the most used Dynamo packages in the world.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Yeah, we met last week. I didn't know he was the creator of Spring Nodes. Huh, interesting.
He's one of the most knowledgeable people I've met in my life when it comes to the Revit API and coding for Revit. It's one of these things where we would have a meeting talking about why upgrading from 22 to 24 is an issue if you use top of surface, because it turns it to top of solids and it simplifies the geometry somewhat. And he just goes, oh, it's only 10,000 data points in the top of solids right now. They'll increase it to 20,000 later this year, but right now it's going to simplify it a bit. And it sits in his head. It's incredible.
Yeah. Actually, the episode that I had 2 or 3 years ago with Howard, the first time he explained the whole start of Reope and when it started as the Bad Monkey. So if people are curious about the genesis of Reope, it we could go there. So actually, we're going to explore later in the show, I think, some of the tools that you've made. So for now, I don't want to keep the audience waiting too much. We should move on to the topic and the title of the video, which is BIM, the Age of AI. I know you have a couple of slides prepared, so maybe we should move to it and you can start sharing your vision about it. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I think I'll go ahead and just try to go into the screen. Let's see, jump to the beginning. How's that? Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, we can see it. All good.
Brilliant. Yeah, so this is Reope. We're architects who code. We're also, work with OpenBIM and BIM manager. Yeah, it's a good one. It's Håvard's. So we also have Henrik and a few others who worked with more standardization and BIM and BIM coordination in the project and project management. So we have that part as well. And then we get to work for some incredible firms, and there's some really smart people out there. So sometimes it's better to start with a quote. This is Renzo Piano saying that architecture is the art of creating shelter for human beings, period. And it's not easy at all. And this is true. This is true when this gentleman started in the field, and it's true today. I even think it's getting harder. And I come from an engineering background. It's maybe less of an art and more utility in it, and converting knowledge into some kind of utility, but it's still hard, and it's getting harder. This is a project that I worked on at the beginning of my career, like 15 years ago. I played a super small part in this project, the new National Museum in Oslo. It's a really, to me, it's a great project. It expresses a lot of the human and the Norwegian culture in a way. A lot of national museums are huge, really traditional constructions with Greek or Roman inspiration, But here, you basically in the middle of the city, you build a little mountain, and you put a light box on top. So this is a German architect, but he's really captured some of the Norwegian spirit here. But this is the art of creating shelters for humans and for communities to meet. I was doing the LCC calculation in the early stages of this project. It was definitely not art. It was calculating the lifetime cost of the materials in the building to make the right decisions around which materials to use. But it was in the support of the art. But I have this sense that more and more of the work we do as engineers and architects are checkbox exercises. We're filling it up forms. It's not really the thing that we got our education to do. There are endless constraints. This is what the BIM model looks like 15 years ago. Tight budgets, believe it or not, and even in the big projects, and some impossible deadlines at times. And one thing is that it feels a little bit like this. You're trying to make a building and design something and create something, and you have a checklist that's your disposal. You're just running through them and making sure that you get everything, you manage everything, and it's not as fun as it should be. I think it should be more fun. Now, there is one thing in this, and this is where the AI part comes in. Every project leaves behind something invaluable, which is data. And this data that we've generated over the years, or that we're generating right now in the projects we're working on, it can answer some of the design questions that we're faced with. I mentioned before that I worked a lot with getting the design decisions together and getting the customer and client on board and getting the technical disciplines to agree on which was the best technical solution. And some of these questions you can probably find answers in the old data that you have. And I think this is where we can find the power of AI. If AI can answer some of these, I don't believe it's ever going to answer all of them. But let's say we're able to focus on these questions and really excel at a few design decisions that are really important to make this project a success, to make the built environment better, then I think that's a great benefit we can expect from AI. And then this is one way that I believe that AI will supercharge how we work with design and BIM. And I guess at this point, I'll take the liberty and the risk, I guess, of defining AI. There's a lot of things out there. This is a human, of course, AI generated, obviously, but still. But it starts with a human. And it always does. Like, someone has to have an idea, some kind of desire or will, or they has to be ignited by a human. And from there on, it's pretty black or white. It's like, you can say it's either software that executes logic, you get a logical answer, it's not AI. Or it's software that looks for patterns in data and gives you the most likely answer, and is AI. To me, like, this definition is good enough that you can use it when you want to understand AI. You don't need to overcomplicate these things.
Yeah, I've heard like deterministic versus probabilistic, and it really helped me out to understand it. Like, AI is a probability that what it gives you is the best answer, but deterministic, like just code or parametric, there's one answer that the code will give you, right? So that's the biggest difference between the two. Is that right? Is it the way you see it?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And I think it's if you're in some of the AI bubbles right now, or surfing some of the big waves in AI, then you get caught up in the general intelligence and super intelligence, and these are conscious thinking beings. And to me, it's it's a lot simpler than that. I think that's one extreme optimism around the current level of technology, and the other extreme, we have a little better autocomplete than what we had before, but autocomplete has been in our phones for 20 years or something. Maybe it's not as daunting as we think, and the truth is somewhere in between. But either endpoints, I think, is a bit radical in a way. It's closer to the middle, probably. But this is, it's super important, the probabilistic side, because this, if we understand this, that, AI is looking for patterns in data, then it's much easier to understand, what we can use it for, what we can't use it for, how it can help us, how we can stay relevant in an age where AI is becoming more and more important to our jobs. So this is kind of the fundamental things. And then I thought I'd just show two examples of stuff we worked on at Reope. The first one is somewhat complex. It's ATI Projects, a fantastic architecture firm in Italy with a really brilliant R&D team. And they saw that the data on their servers started to grow, and then that growth even accelerated. And they found that they had some 2,400 projects over the years where they had Revit files, IFC files, DVGs, PDFs, lots of different formats. And this design data and decisions from the past wasn't readily available. And there they set up this flow that you see on the screen. So you can see, there's a kind of a database, a storage, where there's more and more data coming in, and it's coming in faster. Then they kind of split the flow into two. There was the kind of the parameter data information part, which is handled by Anchor, which Håvard runs, and they do that beautifully. But at that time, around 9 months ago, there was no geometry extraction available, and they tried with some different extractors they found online. They tried something that's on the kind of the add-in store, but none of it kind of served the purpose that they needed. So then they brought us in because that's our superpower at Reope is coding for geometry. I think we're some of the best people in the world at this exact thing, and for sure there are other people that are just as excellent as us. No doubt about that. We're not alone. But we do get, like last year, we were approached by Autodesk to improve Dynamo for Revit. And of course, that is because we are some of the best at some of the coding for geometry that you can find out there.
Oh, really? Did you end up doing it?
Yeah, we just published a case study actually this week on our webpage,
okay, nice.
showing some of the improvements that we've done. They're not all implemented them yet, but at least we've generated the pull requests. And this is open source, so anyone can go into GitHub and read the pull requests we made. So do check that out. And then we created the Revit geometry extractor for ATI, so they can extract geometry into an SQLite database and start using Juniper notebooks to experiment with the data, find relationships between the data of all those projects that they have from the past. So basically turning geometry into statistics, which is really nice for the AI purpose. So this is kind of laying the groundwork for being able to work with AI on data that's unique to the firm. So instead of just using what's available online, built on generic data, ATI is taking a very conscious decision to say, hey, we want to work with our own data because we want our current and future design decisions to be informed by our own design from the past.
Instead of like asking ChatGPT and it kind of gives you generic advice, right?
Exactly. And I think, you should do both. You should both use the tools that are available to you. I think there's some phenomenal tools out there in, Hypar and Speckle and Forma, and all those tools are phenomenal, and they're going to be hugely valuable if you're an architect. Also, some of them if you're an engineer as well. However, over time, that's not what's going to create competitive advantage for you as a firm or for you as a person or a professional. If you rely as a firm on all the generic things, it's a little bit like being really good at Revit. That's not what's going to get you the next job as a firm. It's something everyone can do. So I think there's a huge difference, especially in the age of AI, to use your unique firm data compared to generic data. And that's what AI...
Oh, we lost your sound again. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's back, but it's the other mic. All right. So while you're plugging that, Sorry to interrupt your train of thought, but we've got a good question from Karsten asking why the name Reope.
Good question, Karsten. Can you hear me again now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the way you can read about this on Håvard's blog as well as our founder. It came from the expression, which I think is somewhat common in the south of the US, which is ope, which is kind of a discovery or celebratory sound you make. Maybe someone can confirm this in the chat. I actually haven't heard it used in a social setting before. And then re was something that came up in a workshop in the team before I joined. That a lot of the words that we were talking about, like reimagining the way we design, reimagining the way we work with software for design, rethinking and redoing, replanning. There's lots of re words that came up. So they kind of put those two together and say, hey, we want to do something that's about change. So there's a re there, and then the op is kind of the celebratory discovery part of it.
Celebratory change.
Yeah.
There exactly. You go. All right. So I think you can finish your train of thought about the custom AI for this company.
Yeah, I think you just gave us an alternate tagline: architects who code or celebratory change.
Yeah.
So this works really well. Bendik on our team did a phenomenal job of getting the objects out, and then there's also some ideas for the future here where we'll get relationship between objects, so you can see statistically how far do we place the handrail from the stairs, and you can bring all those statistics and relationship at some point back into Revit as an AI agent or assistant that is based on the data that you've generated in the past. So I think this could be super powerful, and it could be one of the agents that kind of complements the generic agents that you have your own assistant in a way. And then the other example I thought to bring is much simpler. It's something we're working on right now. I think Alfonso either mentioned it or alluded to it last week. But we have this health monitoring app for Revit that we made a few years ago. You see a screenshot here. It's called Radar. It gives you a health score. It has like a number of known things or things that is known to slow Revit down. So this is something that Alfonso was telling me that if someone comes over and say, hey, my model's really slow, or hey, my model's crashing and we have a deadline in 2 hours, can you help me fix it? Then he looks in here to get some hypothesis of what's the issue really. Is there something they haven't set up or done right? So every once in a while we add a few things here and say, oh, this is another reason it crashes. But then I think it was actually Alfonso had the idea, is that what if you can make this predictive, and you can actually predict when Revit might crash, and you can tell the user, oh, now this time when you synced, it's only 10% likely that it will crash, but then you sync 30 minutes later and it's 80% likely. So something happened in between there that increased the likelihood of crash by a lot. So of course, this also prevents what we really want to contribute is the waste of talent. You waste your talent and your experience on designing something, and then the last 30 minutes of your work is gone because it crashes. This is probably a smaller and smaller problem, but when I talk to different architecture firms about this, they all nod and say, yep, definitely had that happened. Definitely annoying. And why isn't this already available from someone?
So are you going to have like a dialogue pops up and say, hey, Revit is kind of starting to be stressed out and might crash in the next 10 minutes, so be careful. Something along those lines? Or
that could be one thing. It could that's kind of the first implementation. It could also be that the BIM manager in your firm or some other colleague comes over to your desk and say, hey, I can see on my dashboard that you're moving towards a crash. What are you doing? And you can track it over time, and you can make lots of fun stuff with the statistics and the predictions here. This is much simpler. It's just using the journal files. I'm sure a lot of people could set this up if they wanted to. We're very lucky to have Ilyana on our team, who has some background in machine learning, is an architect, and knows how to put these two things together. But this is one of the things where all you need is kind of the journal files, and we have journal files from a couple different firms that we work with to inform this. And then, of course, again, the unique data is better than the generic one. So if we put data from a lot of firms together and we find common patterns in the data to say this is when it crashes, that's useful. But it's even more useful if it's on the data from your firm, because your firm's ecosystem around your design software is probably unique. So you might have some plugins that other firms don't have. Maybe you have some developed in-house, or someone's developed something for you. Then that will also feature in the data. We'll find patterns for that. So then your recommendations would be even better.
Yeah, because plugins are often the cause of crash, right? Especially, people like me to test all plugins, so I often have 15 plugins installed at the same time, and I realize some of them can crash. Especially some plugins might conflict with other plugins, so sometimes I'm forced to kind of deactivate them to remove some of these issues.
Yeah, that's it's rare that we see it, but it does happen, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay.
We had I think we were in a meeting with a firm we worked with, and we were talking about this, and they asked, "Oh, what have you found so far?" And we kind of held our breath a little bit, because Iliada had the data and it was on the screen, and everyone can see what's going on there. And luckily, it's not one of the add-ins we've made. We've made some 26, 7, 8 different add-ins for Revit, but none of those caused the crashes there, fortunately for us.
Was it their in-house tool maybe, or something like that?
Oh, it was an external provider.
Okay.
I'm not going to name them because it's not fair. I don't know the details of the circumstances.
Yeah, and Karsten is asking if it's the crash, if it is real-time crash prediction, or if it's more afterwards that you get the data.
No, it can. So the radar health checker we have here, it updates every time someone syncs, as long as they have it activated in Revit. So last year we generated some 400,000 reports through radar. So it will be every time you sync, basically. That's, at least we know we'll be able to do that. Then you have to balance a little bit. If you want real time, it might slow down the model. So you don't want it to check every millisecond you're working. You probably want some other interval that makes sense, where you get model performance and you get the health check. So right now we're working with the sync times, which a lot of people have at 30 minutes. We could also, of course, make it shorter. That's kind of a little bit of a trade-off there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good question. Cool. So those were the 2 examples I thought I'd show. Some of the AI machine learning stuff that we do. The first one, we don't do that much on the AI side, but we do the preparation for it, prepping the data for AI. The other thing that we had on our list, Nick, was that
I'm looking at the list of topics. Well, you've already talked about leveraging generic data versus firm unique data. So if some firm are watching, they're wondering, how can we leverage our firm? I guess the easiest way would be to feed data to a custom GPT and work this way. Is there a better way? How can firms get started?
Yeah, it's a good question, because then I would say you should always start with the decision or process you're trying to improve, and then look at whether AI is the right technology to make that design decision better, or make that process better. A lot of time, because BIM is a lot of time we have structured data that you can use traditional logic on it, and it's much quicker and better than AI. So AI is not necessarily the right answer. But if you want to explore the field, it's first, there's kind of 2 things there. Is kind of the organic approach, where you just give some of your brightest minds access to different Midjourney and ChatGPT and all the other things to try out and see how it works.
That's well.
All last year, the experimentation wasn't super valuable yet. So there's a lot of expectation building, but it doesn't deliver yet. But it will. Some of these solutions will be hugely valuable, and the way we work. And it's kind of keep an eye on what's going on. Then the other approach is kind of a more strategic approach where you go in and think, okay, how do we, like ATI, like how do we want to work with our data and others outside data? Do we have our own R&D department that apply for some external funding, or do we fund it ourselves? Do we contract someone to help us set all this up, or do we do it ourselves? So that's more of a, you start from the strategic perspective. Okay, well, how do we remain competitive in an age of AI?
Yeah, that was one of the point in the description, how to compete for work in the world of AI. Well, it depends how long in the time scale we get. I feel like if we move 10, 15 years, 20, 30, 50 years, it can get pretty wild to think about it. But in the short term, how do you think firms and people can position themselves to remain relevant and even thrive in this new AI powered world?
I think it's dangerous to give predictions about the future. That's very difficult to do. It is a lot of project management is predictions, like you do scheduling and you do planning and budgeting. All of that is kind of so it's very familiar from the past, and I often got it wrong in the past, so I'm going to be a bit careful now as well. I think the human element is probably what keeps us relevant and competitive. So if you find yourself, like, if your tasks could be done better by a machine, then at some point that will probably happen. But there's a lot of things that machines are not good at. I think if you want to just cover the basics, I also put this in here where competing in the age of AI, because it is about data and patterns, right? That's probabilistic. That's what we talked about. You need to, there's three things really. Start early, get data, create feedback loops. So I'll skip the first one for now. We'll come back to it. But get data, it sounds super simple. Like, we all have so much data from the projects, but it's maybe in a format like it was in the Revit files of ATI. You need to get it into a database you can interrogate it in. It could also be that you don't have rights to the data. If you're architecture or engineering practice, you might work with the customer data, but you might not actually have the rights to train and work on it. You might just have the right to your methodologies and approaches. Or there might be other reasons why the data is not possible to use. It could be like physical drawings that you can't really use AI on. There's lots of things around it. Get data looks super simple. And then when you start digging into it, you're deep in some kind of contractual document that tells you whether or not you can use this data for training purposes to get better at architecture. Then the feedback loops is also quite important. And it's really hard for our industry, because what we design hardware, right? So what we put together in BIM in an information model is an information model about a physical building. And feedback from that building, you get 50, 60 years later, or maybe if it has to be redone earlier, maybe 20, 30, 40 years later, which might be, you might get to redesign some of the stuff you did in the beginning of your career, and then you see what didn't work. And those feedback loops are super long. So you have to find a way to make those quicker. You have to see, how the design performs on a much shorter time scale than the actual building can give you feedback. Or you have to somehow get feedback from existing buildings and check them against old design. One way to compete there is to break it down into really small parts, so you can get the feedback loops and improve the small parts one at a time. And this is the reason. So if you then loop back to number one, this is the reason you need to start early, because the feedback loops enables you to get better, and it enables the software to learn. So if you start today and your competitor starts a year from now, you have a year of learning on them. And it's not necessarily something you can accelerate and move super fast. It will get gradually faster, but then if you're a year ahead, you'll also get gradually faster. So starting early in this space and amassing data is actually super, super important things here.
Yeah, I think it goes with the type of firms as well. You know, there's this graph of the early adopters versus the laggards, which adopt technology last, and the early adopters tend to adopt it early. And I even saw some posts online claiming, well, some people who skipped BIM or still CAD, actually it's okay for them because they're going to go straight to AI. But my thoughts of like, well, probably the laggards in terms of technology adoption. So I'm not sure how they're going to be able to use AI so easily, right? So I think being early with technology, at least having people in your team checking things out and exploring certainly helps, right?
It does, and having an open mind that technology will help and assist us and not hinder.
I think it's very useful.
As individuals,
To be careful not to put technology as a goal in itself, because I didn't become an architect or an engineer to work with technology as a goal. The goal is to sustainable built environment and something physical that stands there as part of your legacy in a way. So I think the technology it's a means towards something, whether it's sustainability or material success or whatever your purpose is. So that's the only thing I would caution is like test things, but don't become that guy who's everyone in the firm thinks like, oh, that's the tech guy who deals with the servers and stuff.
Yeah. Well, starting with the problem, as you mentioned, is probably the best way to go. It shouldn't be which AI tool should I use. It would be which problem am I trying to improve, and which tool can I use to make it better.
Exactly. And like this is I as I said when we had the definition black and white of AI, we need humans, we need us, we need to provide the idea, we need to take the initiative. We also need to evaluate the proposed solution because it is probabilistic. So it will tell us, it's 82% likely that the toilet should be placed here in the bathroom. Is 82 enough? That's, to set the threshold, there has to be a human in there to set that, or to look at that percentage and say, oh, that's good enough, we'll place it there. It could also have someone else make all those decisions, but it still has to be a human that defines the threshold and say, okay, when it passes 80%, we just place it automatically. But that I believe that you still need the human there. And then you need to have humans to design for the human experience. And this is a slight difference between architecture and engineering, because as engineers, like everything's very well coded and described, and there's not that much identity in the work. So it's more open to automation and being done by machines. While the architecture part dealing with the space and the human experience, there's much less data on it. There definitely is data, but it's just so much less. So there, the architects are a bit more protected, and having the strong identity and design philosophy that they have in their firms is also something that protects them a little bit from the AI side. This is from a workshop we did last year. My colleague Thomas is there at the computer, and it's actually a technology workshop where we go into this small architecture practice with 10 architects. They asked us, which tool do we use in the early stages? So we took them through Rhino, of course. We took them through Forma, and then showed them how to go between those and into Revit, and when you go into Revit, and those kind of things. So this is a fun one, just to show that we do work with some small firms as well, and really enjoy that part. Of course, this is Alfonso's colleague. I think this also is one reason why we will still be relevant as
the challenge is output by
Thomas Hedderwick, where
sorry, your sound just cut off and switch inputs for a couple of times. So if you can just restart your last sentence.
Yes, I think this is really well said by Thomas Hedderwick, that the challenge in designing is finding what the real thing is to solve. And this is also where you need the human to kind of understand, what's behind that write-up you got, or that text that the customer sent, or that email that you got. It's like, what do they actually mean? What is this human trying to tell me? And sometimes it's not necessarily what they wrote in the prompt to the AI. There's lots of meaning and culture and context behind it that humans unpack. So I still believe that will be very relevant in the future. And then that was kind of what I was planning to show here. Didn't dive too deep into the details. I've seen some of the other lives you've had, which is really nice with the demonstration in Revit and showing everything. So it's a bit of a different one.
Yeah, no problem. So did you say you had something else you wanted to show, or else we can move on to the Q&As?
Yeah, we could show, because last time you spoke with Alfonso, there was some question about some of the stuff we made.
Yeah, okay, so then we can check some of what you made, but there's our relevant questions that I think we should answer first.
Cool.
From Abdullah. In the pre-processing phase, are the BIM models multi-layered, geometry, materials, cost? And what is your solution for incomplete data? So when you get like the firm unique data, how do you ensure that the data is actually of quality, and how do you deal with data that is incomplete or imprecise?
Yeah, it's a good question. The easy answer to incomplete data is volume. So let's say you have one model where the data quality is let's just say it's 80%, but if you have 2,000 models, it's unlikely that it's going to be wrong in the same way in every one. So just with volume, you would kind of partially solve that, because the statistical relationships across 2,000 models would rule out some of those weird missing data points. Of course, if you, let's say you don't have COBie information in any of your models, that's not going to be a pattern you're able to find. But then that's just not something the model can answer for you. So that the other part there is kind of having some sort of overview and feeling for the data that you have in your models. So it's hugely useful not to just rely on the algorithms and software, but also actually look at what you have in there with your own eyes.
Yeah. And then a follow-up. Did you face some semantic inconsistencies, like labeling differences from file to file, as it usually confuses the model? So when you train, was it a challenge to see how things were named this way in this file, and in this file it's a bit different?
Yeah, for sure. And that's the naming convention is something that you would have to work on, and that is difficult with Revit, because the only unique identifier you have is the name when you work with, for example, with types. You can't use a ID or anything like that, because that's something you can change. So if the names are different, it's super hard to say that these are the same things. If you work with geometry as a part of it, and not just the parameters and information, you can call a chair for a wall, but you can recognize the geometry, so you still see that it's a chair. So that helps a little bit with some of the naming things. So you can say this is geometrically completely similar, so you can then assume that the names should be the same, or just use work based on the geometry.
All right, so last week with Alfonso, you can check that out if you're watching live and haven't got it. It was BIM and Etherwick, very interesting. But he mentioned a couple of tools that were made by Reope, and a couple of them was like, that's really interesting. Is it available somewhere? Like one of them that people ask for it in the chat was that push to Miro, where the Revit sheets would be, you could see them next to one another in Miro.
Yeah.
So I think that was bespoke for them, but they say that they don't own the code. It's still the property of Reope.
Yeah. That's where I'll try to share my screen. This is public information. You'll find it on our webpage. Yep. We have a couple, under our products, you'll find some of the things we made in the past. It's not a complete list. It's some of the things that, some of the more popular ones are Netrunner Radar, or BIM Pulse, as Alfonso called it, and Parameter Link, mainly for BIM managers, but also useful if you're an architect or engineer or do the modeling part. And then, subscriptions. We have floating licenses. This for us is a small part of the business. 95-6% of what we do is making these applications. And then there's a small 5% that's, selling the licenses for them. Our motivation is, not having to do it again, but also scaling up some of the fun things we get to do and share it with the wider community. We also have, you can also go into some of these. You mentioned the Myra one. I don't actually think we have a page on that one, unfortunately, so can't really show you that one. There you see our founder, Håvard. You can see a little video of how it works. But then we also have this user documentation in Notion that's also on a site here. So you can go in and that's very small. Let's see if we can turn that up a little bit. But then you can kind of see, okay, if you're an architect, we, for example, have Night Runner that synchronize family types and lots of settings across multiple Revit files. You get centralized control of project files. So this is, one of the ones that's used a lot in both big and small projects, especially when you collaborate on a team, and especially, of course, when you split the Revit file and link them together. Super, super powerful one if you want to standardize information across your project, and you're tired of telling, that external contractor or even your colleagues, hey, can you please use the same family that we're using in this file? You can just override it. And then they can come to you and say, hey, why are you messing with my Revit file? You can tell, well, we agreed this like 2 months ago that we'll use this family and you're not doing it. So now we changed it for you. Changes the conversation on standardization a little bit, which is good for the industry, by the way. Radar is the health checker. I think you talked about that one a little bit last time. Parameter link is also between linked models, but this is also, you're free to go in here and have a look and read about the different functions. And of course, just also go in and try it for free. Go in 7 days and just click around it and see how it works. If you click here,
and
you
that's
fill out
that's the Reope toolbox. So everything is kind of installed.
Yes.
It's not different installs of different plugins, right?
No, it's just we put everything in one because we're lazy. And then someone said, it's some of the tools are super valuable and some are less valuable, so we should split it up so that we can offer the less valuable ones cheaper. So we're looking into now trying to see if we can make some of them cheaper than just everything all at once. But for now, you can just go in and this is what firms pay, and this is small to big engineering architecture practices. We also have some contractors using them. We have some home builders that uses them, lots of residential stuff. So it's and companies from the west coast of the US to New Zealand and everywhere in between. So it's really it scales quite well.
All right, we've got there's one thing I wanted to talk about. At the beginning of the show, I mentioned the new mini course we've gone collaborating together with Henrik. Can you tell me, like, maybe I'll show it on my screen briefly. So, yeah, practical OpenBIM. So I've mentioned it at the beginning. It's going to be released in March. It's a small mini course, 45 minutes. But can you tell me more about OpenBIM? Because I think in Europe, some of these concepts are a bit obvious. It depends on the countries, but it's mandated. So when you talk about it, it's well known by people. But I feel in North America and elsewhere around the world, it's a little less common, right? Can you explain what your vision of OpenBIM and what the kind of work that Henrik does about it?
Yeah. Well, it's been worked this way and for a long time. I think it's already 20 years ago. It was, as I know the story, it was kind of the Finnish public government owner that's kind of built everything that's in the public sector in Finland that made a really nice BIM manual. And then the Norwegians copied it, the Swedes copied it, and suddenly we were all of us doing the OpenBIM thing that the Finns were doing. But the idea behind it is solid. It's if you're a building owner, you need to have an information format that you can use throughout the lifetime of the building. It needs to be a format that's you can open today, but also in 20 or 60 or 100 years. So you need some kind of standardized format, and this is where OpenBIM and IFC comes in. We've had conversations with owners who have something in proprietary formats from that's 15 years old, and those companies that have those formats haven't done backwards compatibility, and then you can't open the file anymore, and then you scrap the design and you just start from new when you do a little extension or change something.
Yeah, so the Revit 2008 file won't open and won't update. That's an issue with building owners, right?
Yeah, so then in Norway and many countries in Europe, they've said it has to be open formats. We have to have any software provider being able to open it and use it. So IFC is the deliverable that you have. In this project where Henrik works, where he has a lot of experience from, it's a large, very large project. We're talking several billion US dollars budget, and they're contracting on IFC files. So the contractor gets the IFC file, they see what they should build, they price it, and then they build it after the IFC file. And it works. There's several examples like that in our part of the world. It also improves interoperability to some extent. If you're a structural engineer and you're in Tekla, or you're working ArchiCAD, and someone else works in Revit, it's always a bit of a nightmare getting data to flow between those. So the open formats also improves the interoperability a little bit. So that's another benefit from it.
Yeah, and something is, I think a misconception that some people might have is that OpenBIM means that they have to stop using Revit and use something else instead. But it's not what it means. It just means that there's a common data environment, and you can export your Revit to IFC, so everyone can collaborate in the file, a neutral format, and the building owner can keep this format for 100 years, and it will still work and not have bugs because it cannot update. And there are lots of tools that plug into IFCs to manage the buildings, issues, and so on. And so everything I'm saying, I've actually learned when I was doing the editing and working with the mini course on Henrik. So I knew some of it, but I've learned a lot. Especially, is very precise in which tool they're using and how the workflows actually work. So very excited about this, to finally have some BIM beyond simply Autodesk products on BIM Pure. Very happy about it. Currently putting the final touches on the editing and the mini book. So yeah, that's going to be in March. It's been a blast collaborating with Reope in this one.
Yeah, we've had some fun. It's really great to bring the experience from our small country out to the world as well. So it's a really fun experience for us as well.
Yeah, we've got a couple more questions. Let's see, from Karsten. When you are using AI for the best solution with data patterns, are you mixing it with computational design afterwards? So you've trained the AI with firm specific data. Afterward, what's happened? Is it computational design? Is it something else?
Yeah, that's a good question. It could very well be. It would assist you or support you both if you work in a more manual way, or if you work in a more computational way, and then of course the computational might scale a little bit better. But let's say that you have some good details from the past, and you use some kind of image recognition to find similar details. So anytime you start on a detail, it runs every 10 minutes and tells you, oh, you're approaching a detail we made 2 years ago. It was approved in the permit process. The customer loved it. Just reuse that detail. Of course, then you can put it in more manually, but you could also imagine that it's an object that you use computationally and you place out many places in your model.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, did I miss any question? Last time for a question, folks. Let's see the video description. Did we go through all of it? I think so. So final word, like the first point you brought up is, how can AI supercharge BIM? So you've talked a bit about it, but if you had to recap your thought, how is AI going to supercharge BIM exactly?
Yeah, and then I'm glad you brought this back, Nicholas, because there's actually one topic that I didn't quite cover today that I'm also quite optimistic about. We talked about finding patterns in data and letting the AI give us some of the answers to the design solutions based on data from the past. I think that's a super potent and super interesting space. There's lots of firms doing good work there. The other part is the customization layer for our design software. So if you use Revit or Rhino, you as a user, you've always customized it to your design process and your approach. And then some of you use visual programming to customize it a little bit further. Some of you make PyRevit, like you have several people on here that showed the PyRevit stuff where you can make applications. And it's a customization of your design software. It works great for one or two people. Some people get it to scale as well, but sometimes that fails, and then you can go all the way to a Revit add-in or Rhino or Grasshopper add-in that scales really well across the firm. There's kind of different layers in the customization journey. But there, with AI support, there's more and more people that gets into visual programming. There's more and more people that get into the text-based one. So we get more and more kind of better customization, and it's more custom to us. And I think as consumers, we also see this, you know, when you're on Amazon shopping, you get personalized recommendations. Your Netflix, your Spotify gives you something personal. And, you know, that's something, this customization layer, this recommendation algorithms, all that we'll also see as a result of AI in the coming months and years gets better and better for our industry. So the tools will be more custom to our work processes than they've been before. So both of those areas, the patterns in data and the customization layer, are two things I'm quite optimistic that, you know, AI will supercharge BIM.
Yeah, and in terms of customization, for sure. Well, if you can listen to the episode I had with Alex from 3XN, using ChatGPT for Revit, pretty crazy stuff that he made. Anyway, check that out. Do you have time for 2 more questions?
Yeah, sure. No problem.
Okay, so from Mohammed, what skills you need to become a BIM software developer?
Good question. I read around 80 applications this morning to join the Reope team.
Really?
So
yeah, well, the next question was from Carsten. You are hiring at Reope. Which kind of coders are you searching for, or all language or only C#?
Yeah, there's so many good people out there. I'm you know, floored by some of the applications we get. There's some beautiful portfolios of work. There is some super interesting videos. People are really creative. And then, you know, when we have the luxury that there's lots of good coders that apply to join us. So for us, it's really important that they have the experience with architecture or engineering, and they felt the pain of you trying to design something and getting it built. So if you kind of are a software engineer, we kind of say we can't really teach you how architecture and engineering works. It's just too hard to teach for us. So we always look for someone who's been in the field for a while and has the industry experience. And then we look for someone who has some experience with C#, just because a lot of the applicants have that experience professionally. So we get to choose that. And it is Python and C# are 2 different languages. It takes a bit of time to move between those. So we try to pick like industry experience and C#. And then the next level is kind of, if you've done something for Revit, that's the easiest expertise for us to bring in. And then if you have done something for buildings, is kind of our space. So there's like a bunch of different things. And then you can kind of jump over some of those if you have a funny motivational letter. We get some funny photos, we get some Python code, some motivation letter, and we want to talk to some of those people as well. So that's some of the things that we look for. Some people that you know, want to challenge the industry and stand out a little bit.
So you got 80 applications already.
Yeah, 85 for we closed it last Monday. We got 85 applications to join. Some remote and some relocating to Oslo.
Yeah, like Mohammed in the chat says he was one of the applications. So.
Okay, then you'll probably hear from us soon if you haven't already.
All right, I think that's it for the questions. I'll just mention back a couple of things before we close the show. Thanks again to Bird Tools for sponsoring this episode of BIM Pure Live. And the tool of the week, Dynamo Multiplayer, one of my favorite. It's free. You can schedule Dynamo scripts and run them. Yeah, I've been using this tool with many clients. Next episode of BIM Pure Live, 2 weeks from now with Dan Warren, a complete expert in ACC, Autodesk Construction Cloud, and he's going to talk specifically about ACC Build, but using it for architects and engineers. which this tool is mostly known for contractors, but this time I'm going to show how to use it if you're in the architecture field. That's with that. And finally, we've just mentioned it again, but practical OpenBIM, really happy about this one. It's a mini course. I've been working with Henrik from Reope. It's a short 45 minutes session where you get all the key principles of OpenBIM that are mostly applied already in Europe, but I think they're going to be applied in more countries soon. So it's good to know. And you don't have to give up Revit. It's just a workflow to make everything more connected and the file format more sustainable in the future. So you get everything you need to know and specific tools that are being used. I think that's it. So back to you, Joachim. Any final word, anything you wanted to say before we put this to an end?
No, it's been a pleasure, Nick. I hope to come back, in the future at some point and see if some of my predictions came through. I hope that AI will help us design a more sustainable and a better built environment. I hope we get better customization of design software we use, and that we can get some help finding patterns in data.
Yes, I love it. Thanks for coming in. That was very interesting. Thanks to everyone in the chat for being active and asking lots of great questions. So meanwhile, we'll be seeing one another 2 weeks away from now with Dynamo. So goodbye, everyone. See you.